Joining us now,
Thank
former
you.
federal prosecutor Guy Lewis and former DOJ official Francey Hakes. We got some house cleaning to do. Just a quick recap. 10 of Trump's picks. Look at this. 10 of Trump's picks won in GOP primaries last night. He now has a 95% success rate. 156 have won since 2020. Francey, I want to get to you. House GOP led by James Comer telling the National Archives you got to preserve records used in this raid. What does the fallout of this? Pressure's growing on the White House, DOJ, and FBI to explain why a Records Violations Act justified a small battalion of nearly 40 FBI agents, some with machine guns. What do you think of all this?
Yeah, Liz, that's a great way to put it. A small battalion of FBI, a cadre of them with machine guns, long guns, backpacks, apparently descending on the president's residence in what everyone agrees is unprecedented. And even though it's unprecedented, we have heard nothing from FBI and DOJ. I do not understand why they thought that this was going to be fine and weren't prepared with a whole lot of public information immediately after the raid ended. We deserve to know this is a former president. He was elected by the people. He got 70-some million votes in his second re-election bid. And the public has a right to know what it is exactly that the FBI, who was after him and deceiving the public and the FISA court over the course of his term, what they say they have now that merited this kind of action.
To what Francey is saying, Guy, coincidentally at the same time, the FBI seized the phone of Trump ally Representative Scott Perry. So, Guy, from where you sit, is this about classified documents or is it about the DOJ Capitol riots probe? There is basis for the FBI to get classified documents, but the question is about these tactics. Is this about the Capitol riots probe or classified documents? What is it?
It's politics. It's nothing but dirty politics. I mean, you know, Nixon could learn a few things from these guys. The DOJ, the rules inside it, and Francey's done it a long time.
The point is, sorry, Guy, hang on. Why do they want the information? Do they have a sweeping remit to get more information to go after Trump for the Capitol riots probe? That's a question.
Listen, I don't think the answer is they're going after Trump for the Capitol riots probe. I don't think there's a crime that Trump necessarily committed there. I do think that he's an opponent of the sitting president who appointed the sitting attorney general of the United States. And I think the conflict there is so apparent. I mean, why would they go after him? They spent 2 years trying to disqualify him in the Russia probe. I mean, they've spent a lot of time and effort to make Trump a non-entity.
You know, they've got this, too. Senate Judiciary Ranking Member ChuckGrassley says he spoke to FBI Director Christopher Wray, Francey. He's saying the FBI's credibility is again on the line. It's problematic handling of prior politically sensitive investigations. He's warning about political bias again and misconduct. Francey, the point here is that he's saying this is overshadowing the hardworking men and women who are agents in the Bureau who have nothing to do with politics. They just want to catch the bad guys.
Yeah, Liz, I hope that's true. I hope there are. And I know there are thousands of FBI agents, men and women, who do work hard. But you had 30 agents on this raid. And where are the whistleblowers? If this is political, as it was over the course of Trump's presidency, where are the FBI whistleblowers coming out and saying that these things violate policy, that they violate norms, that they maybe even violate laws? I don't see them coming from anywhere inside the FBI.
We've got whistleblowers talking to Senator Chuck about the Hunter Biden probe being blocked in D.C. headquarters because they're saying it's disinformation. So who knows? They may step forward if there's a select committee on this, as the House GOP hopes, if they get back control.
I hope so, Liz. I mean, they are coming forward about Hunter Biden, but where were they when that FISA application was put in against Carter Page? And what no one's ever talked about is that FISA application and warrant gave them permission to spy on the Trump campaign all the way in, 2 or 3 people in to the Trump campaign. What did they ever find? We've never heard about the FISA take, and we've never seen a single agent step forward to talk about how Andy McCabe lied or Peter Strzok was lying. So I worry about this organization that I have loved and respected for my entire career. I don't know what's happened to it, but someone has got to put a stop to the politicization of this bureau.
You know, we've talked to a lot of FBI officials in New York field office, in New York State and in D.C. Guy, they do not like the politicization as they see it. They just want to catch bad guys. That's it. But there's also this story. The federal judge in Florida, Judge Bruce Reinhart, who signed the search warrant, people are digging up his Facebook posts, social media posts from back in 2017, indicating bias against former President Trump. There's that. And then we've got Trump pleading the fifth in the New York Attorney General's investigation into whether the Trump Organization and the former president improperly inflated the value of assets. There's a lot going on here, Guy. Where's all of this heading?
So, any competent lawyer, Liz, would have told him to plead the fifth, given the witch hunt that's going on in New York. But look, just like Francey, what bothers me is the FBI is not even following their own rules. There's only one more intrusive method of investigation, and that's a wiretap. Otherwise, the search warrant itself, they had so many other different options. Getting a judge involved, a subpoena, a civil matter, a document request. And frankly, if I was on Trump's legal team, I'd be in front of Bruce Reinhart, who I know, the magistrate judge, and I'd be asking for it all to be unsealed tomorrow. Let everybody see it. If there's a confidential informant, let them see it.
Okay.
If there's probable cause, let them see it.
Yeah, so there's a debate over that, Francey, whether or not, the Trump side of it is saying they were shown a search warrant from 10 feet away, and then Trump's lawyer was ordered to go stand at the end of the driveway during this raid. We've got new details coming in on what they took away, reports maybe letters from Obama or Kim Jong-un. Here's a timeline of the legal battle over the records. Back in January when they raided Mar-a-Lago, let me back up. They didn't raid Mar-a-Lago in January. They took items out of Mar-a-Lago like a cocktail napkin, a phone list, memos, talking points, schedules, a birthday dinner menu. You know what I mean? So, Francey, where do you see this headed?
I have no idea, Liz. Guy is absolutely right. Everyone should be concerned. Does it really take 30 armed FBI agents to recover a cocktail napkin and some dinner menus? This is actually shocking that the political establishment once again is going after someone who is probably going to run for president, trying to bring him down, trying to intimidate him and his supporters so that they will not run for office, so they will not support him in his run for office. Guy is right. This warrant has to come out. The affidavit has to come out. We've got to understand what underpins this extraordinary case.
Chris Christie said it's fair game if the factual underpinnings are there. Senator Tim Scott says we need to play it out. Senator Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, they demand more information, that Americans deserve an immediate explanation. Watch Trump's attorney with Jesse Waters last night.
I can tell you that he was not only working with them, he was cooperating. There was nothing to hide, and he was working in tandem, allowed them into Mar-a-Lago. And the point is, they went in when he wasn't even there and then told his attorneys to leave. They couldn't even be on premises. That doesn't sound good to me.
So you're saying there's a letter from Kim Jong-un, there's a letter from President Obama. Is this really what they were after?
Listen, it's a NARA search. NARA, the National Archives. We're not talking about Jimmy Hoffa. Did he take documents that discuss if aliens existed? This is a joke. This is memento. And quite honestly, I'm concerned that they may have planted something. At this point, who knows? I don't trust the government.
Okay, there's no indication of that yet. Guy, your final word, because they're tightening what's going on around Trump. They're really going after him right now. So what's the fallout? Where do you see, again, I have to ask you again, because this indication we're seeing, it's more serious than just a records raid. There's something else going on.
If that's the case, then tell us who initiated the warrant. Whose idea was this? Who authorized it? Who wrote it up? Who supervised it? Was the AG informed? Was Chris Wray involved? And did the president know about it?
Guy Lewis, Francey Hakes, thank you so much for joining us. It's good to see you.